All right, so thank you for joining us today. We're going to look at today's presenters. My name is Ted Jackson. I'm the statewide organizer for the Disability Organizing Network, also known as the DONet, here at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. I'm going to be your moderator and facilitator today for this webinar. And we're very lucky to have Fred Nisen with us, who's an attorney and advocate from Disability Rights California. And Fred is a member of the state bars of California and Nevada. From 1997 to 1999, he was a civil rights attorney with the Nevada Disability Advocacy and Law Center, which is Nevada's protection and advocacy system for people with disabilities. There he dealt with various aspects of disability rights law. And since 1999, he has worked for Disability Rights California. Since June of 2000, he's been a staff attorney in the Bay Area Regional Office, and his focus is mainly on housing and public benefits. And on this slide, we do have a photo of Fred as well as a photo of myself. Welcome, Fred. How are you today?
Okay, how are you?
Okay, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm excited that you're back to join us. Fred's been with us before for a webinar on voting and has done this particular presentation with some folks at Center for Independence, which is one of the independent living centers involved with the DONet and the Access Now campaigns in the Bay Area, and did this presentation at a community forum in person. So welcome back, Fred.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to ask to go over some discrimination issues.
Okay. So I was asked to go over some discrimination issues.
And before we get started, Fred, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Disability Organizing Network, and then I'm going to hand it off to you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
good.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. So the Disability Organizing Network, also known as the DONet or DONet, you can find us online at disabilityorganizing.net, where we have online resources, news alerts, we have a votings page, and trainings like this one available to members of the community. The Disability Organizing Network is a network statewide community organizing programs to create change and build accessible communities through our Access Now campaigns and summits. These are summits where the community members come together and they identify the barriers that they experience regionally and build campaigns to change the system and to create change so those barriers are no longer there. The different campaigns that we have are really interesting. We've got healthcare campaigns, transportation campaigns, and civil rights and access campaigns. On a statewide level, we will be having a Get Out the Vote campaign next year, and we had a successful one last year. We also do a lot of the implementation of the Fair Education Act with our partner Yo Disabled and Proud and community partners in the LGBT community. And of course, we're doing a lot on the ground and at the 30,000-foot level on health care to make sure that this transition to health care is through the managed care system, as well as organizations like Covered California, is accessible to all Californians. So that's a little bit about the Disability Organizing Network. Feel free to catch us on the web at disabilityorganizing.net. And now I'm going to hand it off to Fred Nisen from Disability Rights California, who's going to talk to us about your rights.
Thanks again.
Thanks again.
Sorry to say to you earlier.
As I started to say to you earlier,
I'm going to talk about some discrimination issues.
I'm going to talk to you about some discrimination issues.
But I can't talk about anyone in the hour of the community.
I could talk about any one in an hour and 15 minutes.
No, I'm limited to 3.
So I'm limited to 3.
Public accommodations.
Public accommodations.
And the Title 3 of the ADA.
Can you say that one more time, sir?
And the Title 3 of the ADA.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty. Can you do that one more time?
And the Title 3.
Under Title 3 of the ADA.
Service animals.
Service animals.
As well as some houses.
And go over some housing issues.
Maybe reasonable accommodations and
Mainly reasonable accommodations and housing issues. No.
And modifications.
And modifications. Next slide.
There are 5 titles of the ADA.
There are 5 titles of the ADA.
But first,
First title of the ADA is.
Well, does everybody know what the ADA is?
Does anybody know what the ADA is?
Everybody.
Does everybody know what the ADA is?
Assuming.
I'm assuming.
But, yes. Can you take a poll?
But can you take a poll?
Certainly. Let's have everyone raise their hand if you know what the ADA is and you're familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So just click the hand up there. And what about on the teleconference line? I think on the teleconference line, it might be easier for folks who are not familiar with the ADA or also the Americans with Disability Act to maybe just speak up. And again, you can press *6 to unmute your phones.
I agree.
I agree.
Sounds pretty quiet, Fred, so I'm assuming that everyone's familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's a good thing.
That is good.
That is good.
The 5 titles.
I'm going to say that there are 5 titles.
Title 1 is employment.
Title 1 is employment. Title 2 is state and local government.
Title 3.
Title 3
is public accommodation.
Is primarily about
public accommodations.
Is about public accommodations.
Or in English.
Or in English.
Private businesses.
Private businesses.
Title 4 is telecommunications.
Title 4 is telecommunications.
Title 5 is miscellaneous positions.
Title 5 is miscellaneous positions. Next slide.
I won't go into everyone is in miscellaneous positions.
I'm sorry, was that I won't get to every one of them?
Of the miscellaneous.
Of the miscellaneous.
What is interesting?
But what is interesting?
Who is exempt from the ADA?
Is what's exempt from the ADA. Religious entities are exempt from the ADA.
As well as housing in most cases.
As well as housing in some locations? No.
In most cases.
As well as housing in most cases.
There's some exceptions for some areas.
With some exceptions for common areas.
The reason for
The reason for
that
that
is that it's covered by the Fair Housing Act.
is that everybody has, no.
Is that housing covered by
Is that housing is covered by
the Fair Housing Act.
the Fair Housing Act.
Also, airlines are not covered by the ADA.
Also, airlines are not covered by the ADA.
Because of the Air Carrier Access Act.
Because of the Air Carrier Access Act.
And the one thing that's not on the slide
And the one thing that
is not on the slide.
that is not on the slide,
But it's been coming up lately.
but it's been coming up lately,
Is the federal government
is the federal government
is exempt from the ADA.
is exempt from the ADA. Next slide. What are public accommodations? Private businesses that are open to the public. That is who is covered by Title III of the ADA. Next slide. Mr. So that you can be discriminated against. There are different ways you can be discriminated against.
The main one is that you are refused services because of disability.
The main one is that you are refused services because of your disability.
Another one is that they will only serve people with disabilities in separate locations.
Another one is they will only serve people with disabilities in a separate location. Where people can only sit in a certain section of the is an example. Next slide. Another requirement under the ADA. Is that public accommodations must provide auxiliary aids or services. There's a lot of examples. Like materials in Braille. A sign language interpreter. Adapted computers. Real-time captioning. Or even a pen and paper can be an auxiliary aid or service. As well as note-taking. Next slide. For physical accessibility of public accommodations. Is a more difficult concept.
Well,
actually, the concept is not difficult.
But the rules are different.
But the roles are different.
The rules.
But the rules are different.
Depending on where the facility was built.
Depending on when the facility was built.
Or significantly altered.
Or significantly altered.
Today is January 26th.
The date is January 26th, 1982.
No.
1992. Within 18 months. Which is 18 months. After the ADA was passed. Buildings built or altered after that date must be readily accessible for people with disabilities. And meet certain guidelines. if a building was built before that date?
The old building does not have to be accessible.
The old building does not have to be readily accessible.
The old building.
The whole building does not have to be readily accessible.
However,
if there are barriers to accessibility, which can be removed, they must be removed. Okay, is something readily achievable?
It must be readily achievable.
Accessibility must be readily achievable?
The removal of the barriers.
The removal of the barriers must be readily achievable.
If that is true,
the barriers must be removed.
And the question is always, what is readily achievable?
And the question is always, what is readily accessible?
No, achievable.
What is readily achievable?
That's the argument for. Basically,
people argue in court, and basically,
well,
that has been argued in court.
And they take a number of factors into account.
And they take a number of facts into account. Like the cost. That is necessary to remove the barriers.
And how much that business is worth.
And how much that business is worth.
Both of the two mean factors.
One more time, sir?
Those are the two main factors.
Those are the two main facts.
But
that goes into considering if a barrier must be removed.
Right.
Next slide. Another way a person can be discriminated is that
they need reasonable modifications.
Is that they need reasonable modifications to policies or procedures that a business might have because of a disability.
A business must make the modifications.
A business must make the modifications
Unless they can go into financial or administrative burden.
Unless they can show an undue financial or administrative burden.
Or is the fundamental alteration of the service.
Or it is a fundamental alteration of the nature of the service. A fundamental alteration would be. Let me think. Of a good example.
Would be a private school.
Would be a private school. Who
has a sports program.
Who has a sports program. Let me back up. Would be for a school. That people, as a requirement that people pass.
Science tests.
Any science tests.
To get into medical school.
To get into medical school.
Somebody cannot pass.
And if somebody cannot pass. Because of a disability.
Even though they get all the accommodations that they want.
Even though they did all the accommodations that they want.
That
they got.
If they can't pass.
If they can't pass. The required science test. Like anatomy.
That might be
that would be a fundamental alteration. Examples of reasonable modifications. Is a doctor's office. Waiving a policy that requires all patients to put on gowns.
No matter what they're there for.
No matter what they
are there for.
No matter what they are there for. Even though it may be a cold.
If the person can't put on the gown.
If a person can't put on the gown.
They should waive the policy.
They can waive the policy. Or at least help the person. Another example is a waiver of the no pets policy.
service animals
for service animals.
versus the good segue.
One more time, sir.
Which is a good segue.
Which is a good segue. Next slide.
But like, but before we go on to that,
But before we go on to that, maybe I should see if there are any burning questions.
So folks, if you have some questions, now is a great time to ask some questions on what we've heard so far. It looks like Mary Zendejas has her hand up. Mary, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know about the service dogs and the policies. Is that our service? Can you just tell me maybe a little bit more about how a service dog can be trained and considered a service dog?
Well, but I know what I was about to do.
That's actually what I was about to do.
I wonder if anybody has questions up to that point.
I wonder if anybody has questions up to that point.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Looking forward to hearing about that.
No problem.
Is there anyone on the teleconference line who'd like to ask a question? You can press *6 to unmute your phone to ask your question. It looks like Mary's got another question.
Yes, Fred, I wanted to know, as far as accommodations, are there some steps to take when a person feels that there's an accommodation that can be put into place? Is there steps that we can take? Like, who can we contact in that regard?
Mom, that is your question.
That's a good question. What I would recommend is to get a doctor's note to say that you need accommodations. Because of a certain something. What kind of limitation? Because of a certain personal limitation. Certain functional limitation. And they can request or deny. And they can request an opinion. You can make a request. With the doctor's note. And then if they deny it, you can either either or. Department of Fair Employment
in housing.
and
Housing.
housing.
Yes, I know doesn't make sense,
I know it doesn't make sense,
but they do take complaints
but they do take complaints
in public accommodations.
about accommodations,
Public accommodations.
about public accommodations.
You file with the Department of Justice.
You can file with the Department of
Justice.
with the Department of Justice
At ADA.gov.
at ada.gov.
There's a number.
There's a number
People.
that you can call.
Or let me back up. If you do file a complaint
Let me back up. If you do file a complaint
with
with the is it FDA? Okay.
Department of Fair Employment and Housing,
With the Department of Fair Employment and Housing,
you have to do that in 1 year.
you have to do that
In 1 year.
and win it.
In 1 year.
Within 1 year.
Same with the DOJ.
Same with the DODA.
Okay, I'll go finish my answer.
Okay, I'll finish my answer,
And then I'll continue.
and then I'll continue.
If you decide to follow a lawsuit,
If you decide to file a lawsuit,
you have 2 years.
you have 2 years.
So, if you have questions, you can always contact me
And if you have questions, you can always contact me
afterwards.
afterwards.
Okay, let me get back to the first question.
Okay, let me get back to the first question.
This is about service animals.
Which is about service animals.
In 2010,
Since 2010,
in 2010,
in 2010,
the Department of Justice
the Department of Justice
says it's about regulations
changed its regulations
about service animals
about service animals
under the ADA,
under the ADA,
which is important to remember.
which is important. If it's important, you remember.
Important to remember.
Which is important to remember.
But we're talking about the ADA right now.
We're talking about the ADA right now.
I'm getting to housing afterwards.
I'll get into housing afterwards.
A service animal
A service animal
can be a dog
can be a dog
or a miniature horse.
or a miniature horse.
And I'm not making that up.
And I'm not making that up.
But why does did that, I don't know.
Why they did that, I don't know.
But it's basically a dog.
It's basically a dog.
Basically, they can only be service dogs.
Basically, there can only be service dogs.
No service cats.
No service cats.
No monkeys.
No.
Monkeys.
No monkeys.
And no snakes.
And no snakes.
It can only be a dog.
It can only be a dog.
That's right.
Next slide. Public accommodations must allow service animals. One more time, sir. In order for a dog or a miniature horse to be a service animal, it must be trained to perform a task for the person with a disability.
It does not matter who trains the animal.
It does not matter who trains the animal.
It must be trained to perform some task
It must be trained to perform some task
that help you
that helps you with your disability.
Yes. That's the basic rule.
That's the basic rule.
And then
And the next slide.
what can a business owner ask about a service animal?
What can a business owner ask about a service animal?
There are two and only two questions.
There are two and only two questions.
Has it been trained to perform a task?
Has it been trained to perform a task?
And what task does it? But this what task does it perform?
It should say what task does it perform?
That's the only two questions.
That's the only two questions.
And they can't ask what is the disability.
They can't ask what is your disability.
What breed of a dog is that?
Or what breed of a dog is that?
Has it been trained to perform a task, and what task does it perform?
It has to be trained to perform a task, and what task does it perform? Next slide.
However, it is not a service animal.
However, it is not a service animal.
If it was all the direct
If it sorry. If it would be a direct threat to the health and safety of others. The best example is biting. That disqualifies it. If it bites someone.
Or if it growls, or if somebody growls.
Or if it growls, or if someone comes up and it growls. That can be an issue. But the main problem that we've been seeing
is about the breed of the dog.
It's about the breed of the dog.
People say we don't care what service it provides.
People say we don't care what service it provides. If it's something like a pit bull, we will not allow it in. They cannot have a blanket rule like that. They have to have actual information about that specific animal before they can disallow it. Next slide. One more time, sir.
Now
the bad news about the new regulations. Companions or emotional support animals are not protected. Meaning private businesses
do not have to allow them in.
Do not have to allow them in.
However,
animal companions or emotional support animals rather than private animal companions or emotional support animals.
If the animals
if the person has a mental disability and needs a psychiatric service animal, they are allowed. Psychiatric service animals are trained to do an actual service. For example,
they know when the owner is getting stressed.
They know when an owner is getting stressed. And he needs to take medication. They give them a sign. That's one example. At the bottom of the slide, I give you two websites with our publications on psychiatric service animals. If you are interested. Next slide.
Now let's turn to housing.
Now let's turn to housing.
Because the rule of service animals support animals.
Because the role of service animals or support animals. The rule regarding
service animals and companions or
companions or emotional support animals are not affected
by the 2010 regulations.
by the 2010 regulations.
And
In housing emotional support animals or companion animals must be allowed. Service animals are not restricted to dogs and miniature horses. One more time, sir. We were worried when the new rules came out.
But the Department of Housing and Urban Development
That the Department of Housing and Urban Development
might file
follow the Department of Justice
and
change its regulations.
But it decided not to do that.
But it decided not to do that. So, next slide. Under the Fair Housing Act. Housing providers must provide reasonable accommodations. And under the Fair Housing Act, reasonable accommodations means a change in rules, policy, practices,
or procedures,
or procedures,
or services
or services
that necessary for a person with disability
is necessary for a person with a disability
to
enjoy the dwelling. An equal opportunity. Which means housing disability. Is that housing disability? Something without the disability? It helps the disability. Or they may require a or it may give you a better quality of life. The trick is it must be necessary to afford you an equal opportunity. And with reasonable accommodations. The landlord pays. If there's any cost involved. You need to make a request.
I
always recommend that you get a letter from your healthcare provider.
And I always tell one to put in the letter.
And I would put in a personal letter.
I
always tell clients
to put in a request.
To put in a request.
But if you don't hear back in 10 days.
That if you don't hear back in 10 days.
You'll assume it's denied.
You'll assume it was denied. And will explore more options. If they deny you, you can file a complaint with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Or with Housing and Urban Development. Basically, what I do as a private advocate, if it's private housing, I would go through the Department of Fair Housing. The Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
federal.
If they file,
No, if it's subsidized housing,
if they subsidize housing,
I would go to HUD.
if I would go through HUD.
The housing providers defenses
And the housing provider's defenses
is just like the ADA.
is just like the ADA. The undue burden
And the fundamental operation.
and the fundamental alteration.
A big example
A good example
is that if you add housing to provide, if you ask your landlord
if you ask your landlord
to pay for attendance,
to pay for an attendant,
that would be a fundamental alteration.
that would be a fundamental alteration.
The landlord provides housing,
The landlord provides housing,
not care.
not care.
If it is both,
If they do both,
then it's difficult issues that I won't go into today.
that's a difficult issue that I won't go into today. Next slide.
In this slide, the several examples of reasonable accommodations
In this slide, there's several examples of reasonable accommodations,
that have preferred parking
such as preferred parking,
and the landlord helping them application,
and a landlord helping somebody fill out their application,
making a phone call to the money attendant to pay rent.
or making a phone call to remind attendants to pay rent,
Attendant.
to remind a tenant to pay their rent,
And we went over the service animal.
and making an exception for service animals,
And moving the meeting to the
and moving a meeting to an accessible location,
and offering the members to turn off the water.
and helping someone to remember to turn off the water,
By
by putting on faucets that shut off automatically. Actually, I'm not sure that's right, but it could be.
And the last one is relatively new.
And the last one is relatively new. To waive the requirement of a rent history. If someone's coming out of a hospital or other facility. The one I'm thinking that is very new, that is fairly new, Is it that if somebody has a disability
that makes them unable to work,
but is not able to work,
but still hasn't the minimum criteria.
they still have to meet the minimum criteria.
However,
However,
the landlord cannot refuse
the landlord cannot refuse
to allow them to take co-signer.
to allow them to take a cosigner.
That can be responsible if they don't pay the rent.
They can be responsible if they don't pay the rent. Next slide.
Reasonable modifications.
Reasonable modifications.
Makes it very confusing because under the ADA,
Makes it very confusing because under the ADA,
what we just spoke about is reasonable accommodations.
what we just talked about was reasonable accommodations.
The ADA calls it reasonable modifications.
But the ADA calls it reasonable modifications.
Reasonable modifications under the Housing Act.
Reasonable modifications under the Housing Act.
The Fair Housing Act.
Under the Fair Housing Act. Is completely different.
It's my reasonable modifications of the unit.
Reasonable accommodations of an existing unit.
Or maybe outside
Or maybe outside the unit. That's necessary for the person with a disability to use the unit. You can make a request. One more time. It must be done in a workmanlike manner. With permits.
But the one big problem that clients have
But the one big problem that clients have
is that the tenant has to pay.
is that the tenant has to pay. The tenant has to pay. Under most circumstances.
And the level may require them to restore the unit.
It may be required to restore the unit.
It might be required to take out the modifications.
It may be required to take out some modifications.
If
it interferes with an attendant? If it interferes with the next tenant. Next slide. The one big exception
is that if the housing provider
is that if the housing provider receives federal funding only with Section 8 vouchers, other than Section 8 vouchers, they must pay for the modifications. Under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Okay. Any questions?
I see we have a question from Mary Zendejas. Mary, do you want to tell us your question?
Yes, thank you, Ted. I thank you, Fred. First of all, that is a wealth of information and very useful information. I'm a little confused, though, on, I'm going to give you an example of what I'm thinking. I moved into my apartment before, and I was able to walk into the restroom. I had an accident and no longer can walk into my restroom. In order for me to be okay here, living here, I need the restroom door widened. Would that be something that would come under the Fair Housing Act? And would that be something that I would have to pay out of pocket?
Yes,
unless the building is federally funded. You would have to pay out of pocket.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Another question that I had, I know I'm full of questions, but going back to the Fair Housing Act in regards to service animals, I had a service animal that I was training, especially because when I had my accident, I was always fearful of being alone. And just last week, I had an incident where I couldn't reach my phone and I couldn't reach anything, and my electric chair broke down on me. That was the reason that I was training my service animal to be able to call out for help when I'm in that situation. Unfortunately, I was stuck there for an hour before a neighbor came by to help me. But I did not continue to have my service dog because of the fact that that I thought that emotional and companion dogs were not allowed. But here, if I'm understanding correct, I was wrong on that information. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Housing.
If the housing?
If it is housing.
Then emotional support animals are allowed.
Great. My next question is for both, like public, when I'm out in the public and when I'm in the home. Are service dogs, they need to be certified before calling them a service dog? Or can you do that while training?
No.
No. There is no certification required.
Great. Thank you for clearing that up for me. As I said, thank you again. This is an enormous wealth of information that I'm gathering today. Thank you, Fred.
Good, you're welcome.
Good, you're welcome.
So are there any other questions? Maybe some on the teleconference line.
Yeah, this is Rebecca. I'll try again.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about apartment houses that are doing some restoration and they're clogging up the parking lot? They're and there are people there that are elderly and disabled, and they are not giving them. They're not telling them that if they make the place unlivable, that they have to pay for an apartment or a hotel until it's livable again. Where would that? It's a private-owned building.
I think that is more complicated than I can answer right now.
I think that is something that is a little more complicated than I can answer right now.
Okay, thanks, Fred.
Where are you located?
Auburn, California.
You can contact our Sacramento office.
Correct.
Do you have that number?
Yes, I can get that number.
Okay.
Fred, I have one more question.
Okay.
What is any recourse if the landlords or the people, this is like a public or a government facility, they have an attitude toward the people with disabilities saying you're entitled and kind of a, ugly attitude toward them. Is there any recourse to that?
Unfortunately.
Okay.
There is no law requiring people to be nice.
Thank you.
So, folks, it is 3:30, and I'm going to have to wrap us up here. If you have follow-up questions, you can put them in the chat box now, or you can email them to me at TED, that's TED, at cfilc.org. But before we sign off here, I want to thank Fred for joining us today. It was really wonderful to have you with us and with the Do Network again, Fred.
It's no problem.
It's no
Yeah,
problem.
and as you can see on the screen here, Fred's from Disability Rights California. He can be reached at 510-267-1200 or at Fred Nisen at disabilityrightsca.org.
And there's a dot
And there's a dot in
That's
between
true.
my name.
Fred.Nisen at disabilityrightsca.org. For the Do Network, you can check us out on the web and with social media. We're at disabilityorganizing.net. Find us on Facebook at donetwork.org. That's our searchable name on Facebook, and please like us and join us. And on Twitter, we're at DoNetwork.org. So we love to tweet things and get information out there and around. We do have a Do Network training library. So today's training will be archived in about 7 to 10 business days online. And you can find that at disabilityorganizing.net as well. Just hit the training button at the top and then click on Training Library. I do want to remind you all to help us get better, and please take the survey. We really appreciate you participating in today's webinar, and we would appreciate it even more if you would share your experience with us by completing the survey. Your feedback is highly valued, and participation is greatly appreciated for our future webinar opportunities. When you exit the webinar platform, a pop-up training survey will appear. And thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too.